So nobody knows about this team yet. And this was like the first big thing that they did. But then they go to IEM Kiev at the very beginning of 2012. And at this point, they've become Moscow 5, so that they've changed over into this new organization. And they end up actually winning the entire tournament. So this is a huge, huge surprise, because this team, basically with 5 Russian dudes, came out of nowhere, killed SK Gaming.
I think technically Edward is Armenian or something, but like the others are Russian. Yeah. Yes. I believe he would always want me to explain that. You know?
Yeah, it's fair. That's fair enough. He is Armenian. So these guys end up knocking SK out, which is a huge upset. But then again, it was like losers bracket game 3 of a best of 3. Nobody really expects them to do well. Now they end up in a group with Dignitas Against All Authority and Team Cypher, who at the time had some players who did some stuff later, like Shleya and Moops, but not a lot of famous
European
players.
Team, basically, yeah.
Yeah, and this was the Dignitas roster that had I Will Dominate, Voyboy, Skara, I'm a Cutie Pie, and Locust. So the kind of roster that became Dignitas and stayed Dignitas for some time. And this team ended up just sweeping their group, beating SK again in the actual playoff semifinals. And then they beat TSM, which was, again, a huge upset because TSM was so popular and they were, expected for us to, or they were expected to do very well, obviously, at this event. This is before NA fans had learned that NA sucked. So they always expected them to win at international events. And so this was kind of the rise of Moscow 5. And then where Froggen played them next was in a tournament called Kings of Europe, which was a French event.
It was online as well.
It was an online event. It was run by Chips and Noir, the French casters. And this event, you guys at CLG EU, and this was right after you had dropped from, this is right after your roster had formed, correct? Because it was Absolute Legends and CLG EU combining, right?
It started as Absolute Legends, and then we wanted to change a couple of players because we also were in the IM Kiev qualifier, which we actually qualified to, and then we decided we wanted to change, I think we changed 3 of our players, and then we couldn't go.
I think you're only allowed to change 2 for IM rules or something, right?
Which is why the SK, I think, got into the main event. Yeah. Because they were the next team up, even though they failed technically to qualify.
So yeah, we changed to CLG EU after that. It was like a merge, and then I don't know, some shady stuff happened, I guess, and then it became CLG EU instead. Then our first tournament was Kings of Europe.
And so this happened. This happened like a week after IEM Kiev too. So it was really, really close to Moscow 5's victory. So what was so exciting about this event is that you guys ended up winning. So this really laid the foundation of what was at the time, and for years, really the most exciting European rivalry, like the classic CLG EU versus Moscow 5, which evolved into like EG versus Gambit.
Which was even a match later on for like World's decision and stuff. So yeah, it was
with the role swap,
right? Yeah,
with the role swap, which we'll get into. I'm very excited to talk about that. But yeah, so this was the first time that you had played against Moscow 5 in this Kings of Europe tournament, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't really know what we expected as CLG. I just remember we prepared like a lot versus Moscow 5 because all I remember is we looked at Diamond Prox's match history, and he has like 15 games of Mundo played, and like he's gonna play Mundo, and we gotta prepare something against this. So, I don't know, that was our first experience with them. They always do something like super innovative. I don't know how it's pronounced. Whatever.
Yeah.
And it just comes down to like preparing a lot against them and figuring out like how we are supposed to play, which is also why the matches drags out for a long time whenever we played them. Or whenever we would come back against them, it would be dragged out for a very long time. Because, I mean, we have new stuff we have to deal with every time we play them, and it's very, very difficult. So it's kind of on the fly, we have to figure something out.
Yeah, that's also, by the way, the other thing that makes this seem like it fucking casting for an anime or something is like the 2 teams who had the rivalry were literally like the best late game team with all the scaling comps, and then the team that used to just smash everyone in like 15 minutes or something ridiculous. It was like the ridiculous cliche of like the unstoppable force meets the immovable object. That's why it was a classic matchup. Yeah.
And also just because you guys tended to play more, I would say like safe picks as opposed to play for
maybe not
wave
Wicked,
clearing.
but yeah, the others. I agree.
Sure. But
I mean,
it's not like Moscow 5 that was known for doing very like weird picks or weird builds, especially Genja, like AD carry, like
Darian had some ridiculous picks.
Yeah, Darian having some ridiculous. So when you talk about the difficulty of preparing for these guys, how would you describe their style in the early days?
It kind of feels like, or felt like, it's kind of like 5 solo queue players that just do whatever they want to do. Whereas like they just leave each other alone and just try to like play their own style and they somehow make it work kind of situation. It is quite a contrast to how we play, since we try to like get an understanding of how everybody wanted to play in CLGU and then like try to plan something around that and have picks that make sense with each other, where Moscow 5 is kind of like crazy. They just want to pick something and then they go do it, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it's GG and go next. But usually they would make it work, and they had really good like strategizing around the picks, or just knowing what's actually like a strong champion in League of Legends. They were super far ahead of everyone else, I think.
You know, one of the things that's always been memed to death is that infamous line they said where it was like "see hero, kill hero." Except except that like it should have been C champion, but whatever. They were using the Dota terminology. Everyone knows that one: "see hero, kill hero." Like that's one of those lines that I feel like fans don't understand, because like that sounds like such a stupid thing. Well, obviously, like no. One of the things that made this team super good, and in my opinion, that's why I always contrast them with the G2 team that had perks. Is it's about follow up in League of Legends. Just go watch any LCS playoff series in the history of the fucking game. It's a bunch of players going, am I in? Am I out? Do I go on this one? Do I want this one? Are you in ink? Do I go for the team fight, or do I pull out at the last second? Like these guys, the joke is when they said see hero, kill hero, that just means whenever someone goes in, we all go in and we either win or lose. And as mad as that sounds, like in League of Legends, it's like people always say it's better to have 5 people follow even a bad plan than 5 people have their own plan. So, like, to me, they were the ultimate example of that, because it seemed ridiculous at the time, because actually a lot of players, let's remember, this is the early days of League, there wasn't coaches and stuff. Like, everyone's basically a solo queue player who's just started playing League for the last year or so in real competitions. So, in some sense, they sort of harnessed the power of just being 5 disparate players and coming together. I mean, you guys did it a different way, but I always thought that was the thing that was mad underrated. Like, because the idea of see hero, kill hero is even if you go in and I'm like, I don't know about this, I just have to go in as well. I don't go, well, I'm just going to back out and let you die, do I? Otherwise, the team collapses.
I think that's also what actually made them popular and like famous. The next tournament after IEM Kiev, IEM Hanover, where they completely ran over like all competition in that tournament, and that was really when it started taking off with that kind of mindset for them, where people finally understood, okay, they kind of do whatever the hell they want. It's where they started doing the thing with ErikHillestad. They roam, he gets level 2, roams around all the time, and Genja's solo lane spot with Urgot with blue buff from level 1. It's like,
as you do.
as you do. It's completely normal, you know?
Dude, the best thing is, at the time, I didn't know I Will Dominate, right? It was years later that I did, like, my show with him and stuff. And so I've now been able to actually get the other side of that story, Monty. And it is hilarious because, like, what people never think about, let's face it, no one gives a fuck about junglers. So no one thinks, what would it be like to be the jungler in, I think it was even in game 1, Monty, of a final that you're hoping you can win. And then the game starts and there's 2 motherfuckers in your jumbo, like, flashing to, like, kill you, etc. And then they're just 1v2 bot lane. And then you're like, oh, so the whole game's just ruined from literally like level 2 or something. Oh, cool. Yeah, I guess I'll just keep playing then. I'm sure that was a fun game.
It is just amazing, like the level of innovation that they had. And I think if we look back in retrospect too, especially players like Diamond Prox, if you want to know who really invented a lot of the farming jungle metas, it was Diamond Prox, especially like running champions like Shyvana, which no one else was playing at the time. And
farming
basically
the opponent's jungle though, yeah,
he was basically just pathing Nirvana, going around stealing all of the camps. And at the time, it's hard to describe because no one else was really doing that. But he would pick these champions that could just clear with extreme speed and just get huge level advantages, which is kind of what we see in the current jungle meta is more or less what like Diamond Prox was trying to do, right? But it was also the information he was able to get, just constantly like checking and seeing the other jungler. So it was very difficult, I think, probably to play against him. Do you remember Snoopy having any frustration on that front?
No, I don't really think we had any problems playing against Diamond Prox because we kind of know or knew what he was going to do. And Snoopy always plays CC champions, and I play high damage burst mages, so it's somewhat easy because they're not like, I don't think Diamond Prox was in sync with Daria and Alex a lot, so it's kind of like we can just go kill him whenever, which is actually what ended up happening in a lot of the games. I think I think people have a misconception of CLGEU where we're just only stalling the game, but there's a lot of games against them where we just smash them in early game. And it's like we didn't really have that many issues, from my memory at least, against like playing against it. Then the same thing for Alex is like, well, he's kind of doing the same playstyle as you should be doing in season 2, where it's like the Raptors have like a 30 or 40 second spawn time. Well, you're gonna go take them all the time because it's the most effective thing you can do. So it ends up being kind of like everybody's just farming in the end because it's how the game is designed right there and then. So
what was your
By
experience?
the way, even though I obviously do want to give them credit for all the innovations and stuff, we're going to go through some of these specific ones, like the Diamond Prox one, and maybe we'll talk about Darien and Genja, and we'll get through everyone, I'm sure, eventually. One thing that has been actually very fun is, because I knew this from like being friends with a couple of them back in the day, but I actually got to reveal it to Monty on shores. I would never get, by the way, I know what fucking, I'm box office. I don't like reveal the plot before it happens. Like, I want the Red Wedding to fucking happen where you don't know. So as a result, I never tell Monty what I'm going to do on the show. So basically what I did is I purposely set it up, because I knew that Monty, right, because he was watching all the best Koreans and Chinese players play, he's trying to reverse engineer why what they're doing is like carefully planned and strategized. Like, right, so they understood that, like, you know, this damage item stacks like this, and if you used it in a certain way, it procs twice. And what's great is Monty was trying to do that for all these crazy shit that they were doing. But when I would bring them all on the shows, everyone with the exception of like Genja in a fucked up way and maybe like Diamond Prox, he was actually pretty intelligent. All the others, they will literally admit, like, I was just making shit up on the spot. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, Darien, like, everyone likes to credit, for example, like Darien, like, oh, he had this genius style where he knew, like, as a top lane, you're never quite out of it. So if you can still get kills and items, you'll be. He didn't do that. He was literally just going, like, I kill him next time. He killed me. How dare he? Like, he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't doing that slick shit. But this is also, it's kind of a sign of the times, though, because in season 2, the period we're talking about, because the game hadn't been figured out and the meta was still changing because they were still patching like a motherfucker back then. It was no LCS. It used to be a world where people back then thought there was a global meta. Like, for example, the reason Diamond Prox was shocking is because everyone thought the global meta is you play like Snoopy, you play like a tanky champion that, like he says, like you play like Malphite or something, and then basically you just have the Heart of Gold item and you don't need to farm. You give Froggen all the camps and then you just fuck maybe even the blue buff at some time, you know. So in that scenario, when this guy comes along, even if it is not all of his ideas are like legit, they're going to go so against the grain that if they work, they're going to work like nothing else because like no one else is doing that shit.
Yep. And I think that's what was so frustrating to play against too, is that they just did have this there wasn't a way to practice to play this team, and there wasn't a way to really understand how they were going to win games a lot of the time, because I mean, they didn't even know, or they were playing some weird pick. We saw a bunch of this stuff too, where it was like, basically anyone was going to do, there was going to be one player in every game who was going to be on a weird pick or taking a conventional pick and playing it weirdly, whether it was like a Kog'Maw with Trinity Force or like a Corki with Randuin's Omen for no reason. I mean, Genja was kind of like the king of supportive AD carries. I don't even know how to describe him. I really wonder what it was like to play against him in lane at the time. But were you confused a lot of the time by what Genja was doing in these games?
Yeah, I think half the things he did was just so dumb, and the other half was like really, really genius.
Yes, he was like a savant, wasn't he? Yeah.
No, but like in Kings of Europe, there was a new item build that he came up with, and it was boots, triple Dorns into Phantom Dancer, and you have Rickle's Lantern, and it's like, what the fuck is this? Like, but apparently it just wins against everything, so everybody else started copying it. Then other times, well, he has Trinity Force and Randuin's and Corki, and it's just useless. Like, what the hell is it supposed to do? You know, it does nothing. So I don't know. He has some smart things, and then the other things
I can even tell you a mad detail about that because I actually got to do one of the rare interviews with Genja, and it's in Russian. It won't be on my channel; it'll be on like the Acer Esports channel, but it'll still be on YouTube if people want to look it up. And basically, because I got to interview him and Edward, I got some mad stories. Like basically, when Genja would play in lane, even though he was on the team that was winning and he was doing all this weird shit, most of the players that played against him would be like, it's very weird to play him though, because it's almost like he lets himself get in danger of like the support hitting like the skill shot on them, like like an army bubble or something. And the reason why is this, Monty, it's so nuts. Genja basically thought he was like Uzi I, mate. Like, he thought he was the genius who just understood the whole game, right? So in his philosophy, for real, he actually was a true AD carry. He didn't believe it was about getting kills in lane. He thought AD carry was, I farm the minions till I have my items, I join the team fight, and I kill people. So I don't have to kill people before that. So basically, for real, he thought of Edward and all his supports as his, like, bodyguard. Like, it's your job to stop him hitting the fucking skill shot on me, mate. And there's a mad story where one of his supports told me that Genja's style is, if he wants you to, like, fucking, like, play up in a certain situation or, like, not check something, he wouldn't tell you that. He would just let you, like, face check the brush, die, like, he'd back off and let you die. And then next time he would just basically be like, don't do that again or something. Like, imagine playing with someone like this. It actually sounds so mad.
Well, later on, I think Edward had enough of that, because there was a time where he like left Gambit for a bit, and I can understand why after years of putting up with
they were like a style mismatch. Although bizarrely, I will say that's actually the interesting part for me about the team. A lot of the other players actually fit, but because Genja and Edward was so like chalk and cheese, you'd say in English. It's just two things that don't go together, basically. So, like, somehow there was like a creative tension that when it worked, it was brilliant, though. Because as a result, if you have like a super passive Genja, well, if you put a super passive support player with him, like, I don't know, fucking Nif back in the day or something, that'd be terrible. Like, that'd be a lane that could never win. If you have Edward, though, and he's going to like flash forwards on like fucking Blitzcrank or something and do a crazy play, you can't just go in on Genja all the time. There's a mad way. It's sort of like they sort of held each other in check to some degree. Keyword some degree.
Okay, let's keep talking about some of these events that were happening, because sure. I want to go back to Kings of Europe, because this really set up the rivalry. And I'm curious, Froggen, did you perceive Moscow 5 as like the main threat? Did you consider them your rival after that event, or were you still thinking about some other teams? Was this because it really was the start of something that would last for years and years and years after that?
I think I was just playing for fun, to be honest. Like, I don't know, it's like my first tournament. I was still going to school, I just turned 18. I wasn't even 18 at the time. Like, I was just chilling. Like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna play some Anivia. This is gonna be fun, kind of thing, So I mean, I don't think we could expect the Gambit to like turn out to be the Gambit that we now know. Like, it came after they started winning a couple of tournaments. Of course, there's that whole thing where they I don't know, they have a problem banning out certain champions against players because they really want to win against like whatever champion.
They had like an ego angle, right? Like, yeah, they wanted to kind of give you the champion and prove they could beat it, right?
Yeah. But I didn't realize it was going to be a rivalry at that time. And honestly, CLG, we didn't even like qualify for anything at the time. So it's like hard to, I mean, if you can't qualify for anything, it's hard to have a rivalry against the team that's winning all the offline tournaments. So
yeah, that was also the other thing to mention, Monty, is initially before they played like the DreamHack Summer or whatever, they actually had the opposite reps, which was that CLGU was the team that was amazing online, but they went to their first LAN, some shit French team we don't need to know about, and didn't do very well. So they were considered onliners. Meanwhile, because Moscow 5's in Russia and you're not going to get amazing ping to a server in like, I don't know, Amsterdam or Germany or something, they obviously used to be like, oh, well, even if they lose online, who cares? They'd smash everyone on LAN. So actually everyone was so hyped for them to actually properly meet and see, like, let's see what happens if they play a proper LAN match,
When was the first LAN match that you actually had versus them? Do you recall?
Isn't it the group stage DreamHack Summer?
Yeah,
it's the one that goes like 70 minutes or something, isn't it? Isn't that the game?
It's a massive comeback, yeah. Wait, that might be.
Or was the one before that? Yeah, that might be the decider.
I think that might
be
one
right?
before.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember for that game they turned up like 20 minutes late, like all scheduled, and just being like, "Well, what the fuck we're supposed to play?" So that was.
Don't worry, that is a classic move that like CIS esports people are notorious for that. And Counter-Strike Na'Vi used to do the same thing. Because you're talking about like tournaments that back in the day, they're not going to disqualify you if you're like the number one team. Mate, those guys used to love just rocking up half an hour late, like, all right, we'll just set our gear up now. So they're not going to disqualify you. So you just do it as like an intimidation factor or something, or just lazy. One of the two.
Yeah. But I think our rivalry started with DreamHack Summer for sure because of the massive comeback, and then we also won in the finals against them again.
Yes.
So that's when it really started, and then also they were known for being that kind of like a villain. You know, they don't want to do all this like stuff with signing autographs, doing all the friendly stuff. They go play their tournaments, they go be themselves, and then they just arrive and they like look pissed or upset or something about anything really. Whereas CLG was like, we were kind of known for being the exact opposite.
Sure.
So.
Yes. You know, by the way, that essentially, Monty, means that game of League of Legends, the classic one that's like 68 minutes or whatever.
61 minutes.
It's basically like LS's dream game of League of Legends, because one team that has, like, in theory, the really good late game comp just does wait forever farming under tower in a way you can't now, like at the inhibs, until they finally get like one slightly dodgy engage from the opponent and then just win the game off it or something. Like, it was actually like put it this way, it's one of those ones where even though it was so hyped, it's like, it wasn't a great game to watch. I'll tell you right now. It was exciting. Wasn't a great game to watch, though.
Most games against them 5 wasn't great to watch, to be honest. But it's hype.
Sure.
Yeah, it was hype at the end, and this was one of your classic Anivia games too, where you could just wave clear forever.
Yes.
And you also had Crepo on Soraka, you had Yellow Pete on Tristana, Snoopy on Alistair, and Wicked on Aurelia, whereas Darien was Vlad, Lee, Karthus, Corki, and Nunu on Moscow 5.
Which is a bit weird setup.
They had the classic combo from the Empire days. It was something that they continued to use for a while, which was, if I recall correctly, which is the Nunu and Karthus. So it would pop up here and there. And this is the game you guys won in group stage. And like you said, it was this was the game you played, and then you rematched in the final and you won 2-0. So you actually 3-0'd Moscow 5 in this entire tournament. But what was the atmosphere within the team like? Describe what it was like playing that comeback game. It was 61.5 minutes in length. So it's definitely one of the longest League of Legends games of all time. And I think it was the longest game of League of Legends played when it was played.
I think we have a 71 or 72 minute game against
that would not surprise me. Do you remember when that was?
Well, I remember Alex was playing Malphite and I was playing Anivia in that one too. So I mean, there's so many tournaments that the bots have been lost because of different sites that were used back in 2012, which is unfortunate. And own TV, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
which doesn't exist anymore, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, at DreamHack, I remember because we were sitting on. It's kind of like there was a barrier between us and Moscow 5. So we're sitting on one side. There's a barrier, and they're sitting on the other side. So it's kind of like if we shout loud, it's kind of like we can hear each other because we don't have these helicopter headsets at the time. We're just using our own, whatever we bring. So, I mean, we're just sitting there chilling, not really a lot going on, just being like, girl, let's try to stall. They're going here. Let's try to wave clear this. Let's try to wave clear that. But the time where we started getting really strong and stuff, we started like trying to actually formulate plans. And of course, the dragon, there's no dragon soul. For the ones that don't know, it just gave gold, flat gold. So there's not really a win condition like that. And the super creeps were like, or the super creeps and the spare and up creeps were like really squishy on top of that. So it gave region or something. It gave some weird stats, I think. Holy shit, it's been a while, but that was not really a good way to end the game. So if you just have an Anivia, you can kind of stall for forever, which is what happened.
Yeah, the famous stall champs back in the day were Anivia and Ziggs.